My husband of 31 years looked me in the eye over the dinner table, the same table I had set every single night for 3 decades, and told me I hadn't contributed a single real thing to this family since the day I stopped working. I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my fork and finished my pot roast. But I smiled. And that night, after he fell asleep, I went to the kitchen, sat down at the table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of decaf, and I started writing. Let me back up. My name is June. I am 63 years old. I live in a three-bedroom house in Naperville, Illinois, the same house my husband Philip and I bought in 1996 for $187,000, which is now worth close to $480,000. I know that number because I looked it up the morning after the dinner table conversation. I thought it was relevant. Philip is 66. He retired 2 years ago from a logistics company where he spent 34 years managing supply chains. He is a methodical man. He tracks things, spreadsheets, budgets, receipts. He knows to the penny what the electric bill averaged over the last 5 years. He can tell you without checking what we paid for our first car versus what we sold it for. Numbers to Philip are how the world makes sense. I used to find that quality reassuring. I stopped working in 1994. We had just had our second child, our son, and our daughter was already 3. Daycare for 2 kids in the Chicago suburbs would have eaten nearly everything I made as a dental hygienist, and Philip's salary at the time was growing fast. We sat down, we talked it through, we decided together. I would stay home. We would be a one-income family. It made sense on paper. Philip likes things that make sense on paper. What the paper didn't capture, what no spreadsheet has ever been designed to track, was everything that came after. For 31 years, I cooked every meal in that house except for the nights we ordered pizza, which Philip usually suggested, and then ate the most of. I did all the laundry, not just washing and drying, folding, sorting, making sure Philip's dress shirts were hung immediately so they wouldn't wrinkle, ironing the ones that needed it, taking the dry cleaning in and picking it up. For 31 years, I kept the house, not just tidy, genuinely clean. Baseboards, ceiling fans, the grout in the master bathroom that Philip has never once looked at but that I scrubbed on my hands and knees every few months because I knew if I didn't, no one would. I raised our 2 children. I drove them to school, to soccer, to piano lessons, to orthodontist appointments. I sat with them through fevers. I helped with homework I barely understood by the time they hit high school. I showed up to every single school event, every play, every concert, every award ceremony, every parent-teacher conference. I made the Halloween costumes and the birthday cakes and the Christmas stockings that our daughter still puts out for her own kids now. I managed everything: the insurance, the car maintenance schedules, the vet appointments for our 2 dogs, the holiday cards, the thank you notes, the relationship maintenance that keeps a family connected, the calls to Philip's mother every Sunday, the birthday gifts for his brother's kids, the Christmas dinner we hosted at our house every year for 22 years because Philip's family expected it and he never once told them it was a lot of work. And I did all of it without an allowance, without a paycheck, without a budget of my own. Philip handled the finances. That was the arrangement. He paid the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. He had a system, and the system worked, and I trusted it. For spending money, I had a joint checking account that we both contributed to from his paycheck, and I was careful with it. Careful the way you are when you know someone is watching, even if they don't say so. I bought the store brand when I could. I waited for sales. I clicked coupons into my 60s, which is something I never imagined I would say out loud. If I wanted something for myself, a new pair of shoes, a book, a birthday gift for my sister, I thought about it for at least a week first. I asked myself if it was reasonable. I usually talked myself out of it. Philip did not do this. Philip bought a riding lawnmower in 2019 that cost $2,800 without mentioning it until it was already in the garage. He played golf twice a month for 20 years, greens fees and equipment and the occasional weekend tournament. He bought the new truck in 2021 because he said his back hurt sitting in the old one. I didn't know the total. I was not consulted. It was his money, and so those were his decisions. I understood that arrangement. I accepted it. I told myself it was fine until the night in March when our son-in-law came for dinner and mentioned in passing that his company had started tracking hours more carefully and paying out overtime. Philip said, nodding like he had thought about this for a long time, "That's how it should be. People should be compensated fairly for their actual contribution. You work, you get paid. Simple as that." He looked at me when he said it. I am not sure he meant to, but he did. That night at dinner, after our son-in-law and daughter had gone home and the dishes were done, by me, as they always were, Philip leaned back in his chair and said it. He said that he had been thinking, that now that he was retired, he was looking at their finances more carefully, that he appreciated everything I had done, but that the kids were grown, the house was manageable, and he had to be honest. He felt like he had been supporting me for a very long time, and he wasn't sure that was sustainable going forward. He used the word sustainable. He said that he thought it was only fair that I find some way to contribute financially, that anything I spent from here on out should come from money I earned myself. He said it the way he explained spreadsheets, logically, reasonably, like it was just math. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Okay." He looked a little surprised. I think he expected a fight. I said, "Let me think about that." And I smiled. And I went to bed. The legal pad was the beginning. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I never have. But I am organized. 31 years of managing a household will do that to you. And that night, something settled in me that felt less like anger and more like clarity. I thought, he wants an accounting. Fine, let's do an accounting. I spent the next 3 days on research. I used the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I used a few salary comparison tools online. I looked up hourly rates for house cleaners in the Naperville area, 35 to 45 to 45 per hour. Personal chefs and meal prep services, 40-75 to services, 40 to 75 to per hour. Childcare and nanny services, historical rates, since the kids were grown. Laundry and dry cleaning services, errand runners, personal assistants, and elder care coordination, which I provided for Philip's mother for the last 6 years of her life, including managing her doctors and her medications and, at the end, coordinating her care home placement. I built a spreadsheet. I was not fast at Excel, but I figured it out. I used conservative numbers, the low end of every range. I did not pad anything. I was not trying to win an argument. I was trying to be accurate. The spreadsheet covered 31 years. I broke it into categories. Meal preparation, I cooked, conservatively, 300 dinners a year, not counting breakfasts, lunches, holiday meals, or the meals I made for guests. Just dinners. At 1 hour average per dinner at $40 an hour, the lowest end of a personal chef's rate that was $12,000 a year. Times 31 years, $372,000. Just dinners. House cleaning, I estimated 6 hours a week. Professional cleaners in our area charge $35 an hour for basic service, more for deep cleaning. At $35 an hour, 6 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, $10,500 per year, times $35,500 per year, times 31,000, 55,500. Laundry and clothing maintenance, I estimated 3 hours a week, $25 an hour, the low end of a laundry service, $75 a week, $3,750 a year, times 31, tidy 3, times 31,162s. Childcare and household management during the years the kids were home, 18 years roughly. I used the national median for a nanny household manager, $35,000 a year, times 18, $630,000. Errand running, scheduling, appointment management, insurance coordination, I estimated 5 hours a week at $25 an hour, $6,500 a year, times $35 a year, times 31, $201,500. Elder care coordination for Philip's mother, 6 years, roughly 10 hours a month on average, more at the end. At $25 an hour, $18,000 total. I did not count the emotional labor. I did not count the mental load, the constant background processing of a household, the remembering, the anticipating, the planning. There is no line item for that. I left it out. The total, using conservative numbers for everything, came to just over $1.66 million. I printed it out. I put it in a manila folder. I labeled the folder clearly, the way Philip liked things labeled, and I set it on the kitchen counter. Then I started the new arrangement. The morning after I finished the spreadsheet, I made myself breakfast. 1 egg, scrambled, 2 slices of toast, buttered. A cup of coffee, my coffee, the medium roast I liked, not the dark roast Philip preferred that I had been buying for years because it was easier to just buy one kind, and I was the one who cared less. Philip came downstairs in his robe and stood in the kitchen doorway. "What's for breakfast?" he asked. "I had eggs," I said. "There are eggs in the refrigerator." He stood there for a moment. "You didn't make enough for both of us." "I made enough for me," I said pleasantly. "You mentioned contributing fairly." I thought I'd start practicing. He made himself cereal. He didn't say anything while he ate it. The silence was loud, but I had lived in a lot of silences over the years and I was comfortable with this one. The week that followed was instructive. I cooked for myself. I planned my own meals, bought my own groceries separately, used my half of the refrigerator. I found this surprisingly freeing. I made things I actually wanted to eat, things I had stopped making years ago because Philip didn't care for them. Lemon pasta, a white bean soup my mother used to make. French onion soup that filled the whole kitchen with the smell of caramelized onions and made me feel 26 years old again. Philip ate frozen dinners for the first 2 days and then started ordering delivery. He did not ask me to cook for him because I think he knew what I would say. He started doing his own laundry on day 4, though he shrank 2 of his shirts and turned a white undershirt faintly pink, which I noticed but did not mention. I stopped scheduling his appointments. His dentist appointment came and went. I know because the reminder card came in the mail and I left it on his desk, where it sat until the date passed. I stopped calling his brother on his birthday. I stopped handling the homeowner's insurance renewal that was coming up in April. I left the paperwork on the same desk. I went to my book club. I drove to see my sister in Indianapolis for a long weekend, which I had been putting off for 2 years because there was always something at home that needed me. I called my daughter on the phone and she asked how things were going and I said, "Interesting," and she laughed and said, "That didn't sound good." "It's not bad," I told her. "It's educational." On the 11th day, our daughter called Philip. She told me this afterward. She said she had been calling to check in and he had mentioned casually that things at the house were a little different lately, and she had asked what he meant, and he had explained the new arrangement. She was quiet for a moment on the phone with him. Then she asked him carefully if he had thought through what I actually did every day. He said he appreciated everything I did, but that in the modern era, with labor-saving appliances and grocery delivery available, it wasn't really comparable to going out and earning a salary. Our daughter, who works full-time as a nurse, has 2 kids of her own and splits housework with her husband in a way that I deeply respect, said to her father, "Dad, do you know how much a housekeeper costs? A personal chef? A nanny? I have 2 kids and a husband who does his share, and I still feel like I'm running on empty every single day. Mom did all of that alone. For 31 years. Philip said he would have to think about it. She called me right after and said, "Mom, I want to come over this weekend." "Come," I said. "I'll make the white bean soup." "Don't make it for Dad," she said. And I laughed for the first time in 2 weeks. She came on a Saturday without her husband and kids, just the 2 of us. We sat at the kitchen table and I showed her the manila folder. She went through it slowly. She didn't say anything for a long time. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "Mom," she said, "this is over $1.5 million. Conservative estimates," I said. "Low end of every range. I didn't include everything. She set the folder down. Why didn't you ever? She stopped. I didn't know. I grew up in this house and I didn't know. I didn't know either, I said. Not until someone asked me to start justifying my existence. She reached across the table and held my hand. Philip came in from the garage while we were sitting there. He saw the folder on the table. He looked at me. I nodded toward it and he sat down and he picked it up. He read it the way he reads every document, carefully, slowly, going back to recheck numbers. Our daughter and I drank our coffee and let him read. He set it down after about 10 minutes. He didn't say anything right away. Philip processes slowly. I have always known this about him, and over the years I had learned not to push into his silences too quickly. Finally he said, I didn't think about it this way. I know, I said. I didn't mean. He stopped, started again. I was thinking about retirement, about money. I was worried about money and I took it out in the wrong direction. Yes, I said, you did. The number on that spreadsheet, he said slowly. That can't be right. It's conservative, I said. Check the sources, they're cited at the bottom. He looked at the last page. He was quiet for another long moment. Then he said, I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that, I said, not meanly, just honestly. Our daughter made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been something else. Philip looked at me, really looked, the way he hadn't in a while, and he said, What do you need? And I thought about that question. I had been thinking about it for 2 weeks, really, underneath all the cooking and the laundry and the legal pad arithmetic. What did I need? I needed to be seen. I needed 31 years of work to be acknowledged as work, not as the lucky life of a woman who didn't have to go to an office. I needed a household budget that I controlled without having to justify every purchase to a man who spent $2,800 on a lawnmower without a conversation. I needed a financial advisor appointment, which we had been putting off for 3 years, where we would sit together and look at what we had and plan for what came next as actual partners. And I needed, this sounds small, but it wasn't, I needed Philip to start carrying some of what I had been carrying alone. I told him all of this, quietly, without anger, because I had spent 2 weeks moving through the anger into something cleaner. He listened. He didn't argue. What happened after that was not a movie moment. Philip did not sweep me into his arms. He did not appear the next morning with flowers and a transformed personality. He is 66 years old and he's been a certain kind of man for a very long time, and change for him is slow and methodical, like everything else. But he made breakfast the next morning. Not well. The eggs were a little rubbery and he forgot that we had run out of the bread I liked, so he toasted the wrong kind. But he made it. He set 2 plates on the table and he poured 2 cups of coffee. He called his brother himself to apologize for missing his birthday. His brother was delighted just to hear from him, which is its own kind of commentary. He came with me to the financial advisor appointment. He sat there while she walked us through the numbers, and he did not take over the conversation, which was his habit. When she asked me a question, he let me answer it. It is a small thing, but after 31 years, a small thing done differently can feel like an entire new room opening up. My daughter told me, a few weeks later, that her own husband had asked her what happened between me and Philip. She told him the general version. He went quiet for a minute and then he said, I should probably start paying more attention. She texted me that and added a single emoji, a little purple heart. I have it saved. The folder is still on my desk. Not because I need it anymore. Philip and I have talked through the finances, changed some things, agreed on others, but because I want to keep it, not as a weapon, as a record. 31 years of mornings and meals and folded laundry and school pickups and phone calls and holiday dinners and doctor appointments and silent, invisible, uncounted work. Someone should have counted it sooner. I suppose I should have too, but I counted it now. And it turned out that $1.5 million worth of love and labor is worth quite a lot, even to a man who thinks in spreadsheets especially to a man who thinks in spreadsheets. If this story found you today, I want you to know the work you do at home is real work. It has value. It always has. Sometimes it just takes a yellow legal pad and 31 years of patience to make that visible. I'm June, and I'll see you in the next one.